even just sort of the mythological expansion, Superman expansion, you know, I think one of the cool things about this technology of the spaceships and the environments, Alex really did an awesome job kind of creating like an alien world, but also not, you know, making it too crazy where like you couldn't relate to it. You know, that's always the challenge with sort of sci-fi worlds, you know, like that they're not completely so abstracted that they're not, you don't know where like people fly the ship from or any of that. That it was a good, I thought it was a really good mix. Again, on Themyscira, but that as a different character.
Yeah.
And then we were trying to figure out maybe if she's the same character.
Well, I know there was
that's
rumors or theories that there is some Kryptonian lineage in the Amazons since the Kryptonians
There absolutely
crashed
is. There absolutely is.
Oh, yeah?
I do believe that whoever the chrysalis escaped from the chrysalis on the scout ship ended up briefly in Themyscira.
Oh, interesting.
And some of their, yeah, maybe that's the great grandfather of.
Yeah, so the same
That would be cool.
House of Wynn.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, she had a great scene in Justice League too.
Yeah.
That was restored in the right version, so that was awesome to see.
Yeah, there's really for this boutique experience. Everything else is a slight compromise, right? 166 is a slight compromise, but it's cool. But that giant IMAX format is what I really wanted people to see it in, and really the real intention of the movie, and the number of people I knew, even in its widest release, that we're going to see it that way would be a fraction of the general audience, but still thought it was the best way to see it. And it was my intention to promote, if the film was ever released in IMAX, to promote the movie as this is the best way to see the movie.
Yeah, they
right?
always see it the way it was meant to be seen.
See the movie the way it was meant to be seen. To date, the number of people who have seen the movie in the correct format is probably less than 20 people in the world, right? So this movie, this gigantic movie, ridiculous scale, everything about it, actually seen in an actual IMAX theater in the correct aspect ratio on the big screen is probably less than, I would say probably 18 people have ever seen the movie. So that's the exciting thing about what we're doing on Sunday, seeing the shooting it. We had, in the 7-Eleven, we had a queue for Canopy, and I think the queue was Canopy, but the guy operating it, his name sounded kind of like Canopy. And so when we yelled out, like I think we yelled at the guy's name, and he thought it was Canopy, so he pulled the canopy and it fell. And it was only like, we could only do like, I think we only had one take. And then I was like, oh my God, okay, awesome. So then we had to like, they kind of jerry-rigged it back together, and we got one more take out of it, but it was completely, DJ had to fix it with.
Well, I don't think anybody ever noticed until you just pointed it out. So
that's why there's fire all over it and stuff.
Yeah.
They were like, oh, put.
What as far as his performance goes.
Yeah, Shannon. I don't know. Shannon comes out of the box pretty on point. I don't know if there's a more or less. It's more like about, I think if you give him, my notes to him would mostly just be about like, oh yeah, remember like this thing we talked about, this idea, you know? So he'd be like, okay, cool, like, right, I got it. Like that's like a thing, a subtext that he could work.
Well, because he's a meme for this movie, for some of the lines that he just yells, but then also a number of his best lines in this are just completely understated too. So he's got the full spectrum of Shannon is in this.
Yeah, you really do. It's just
To our gracious host for the next 2 days, Art Center College of Design. Our host for Sunday, Universal Cinema, AMC at City Walk, and IMAX. And to Vero for hosting our live stream. Eamon, we wish you were here. I hope you're watching. To Jim Lee, who did these amazing art for our t-shirts. And I hope I don't butcher their name, but Xu Zhe Ho Zhang, an Art Center student who did the Art Center posters, and John Stanford, and works for creating all those amazing posters, to our printers, Midnight Oil and Buffalo Specialties, who also donated all the shirts, to Bonds, to Weta Workshop, to Company 3, to our food and beverage sponsors, Anheuser-Busch, La Pizzeria Company, Hot Jam, Sodexo, to Superhero Charity, and 3 Ronin. And thanks to all our panelists, moderators, and you volunteers who really helped setting all of this up. To AFSP for all their help and support, not only for this event, but also for their support for Zack and I, and also to the community throughout the years. And to Wesley Collar. Because without Wes, this event would not have come together. Wes. We are so thankful for all Wes's hard work and dedication, and most importantly, for the friendship. He is family. And most importantly, to the fans. A special shout out to everyone that is online around the world. It is truly amazing what this fan community has done, raising over $1 million for AFSP. But even more importantly, creating awareness and much-needed discussions on mental health and suicide prevention. This amazing fan community has contributed to AFSP's ability to invest in new research grants to better understand and prevent suicide. In the past 5 years, it has given 200,000 people life-saving education and resources through AFSP's signature program, Talk Saves Lives, an introduction to suicide prevention. This program provides participants with a clear understanding of suicide, including the most up-to-date research and data on suicide prevention. Our fan community has helped AFSP to advocate for suicide prevention and mental health by sending over 129,000 messages to public officials over the past 5 years. Advocates had a chance to share their stories.
And I've seen it several times. I haven't seen it in a while. I'm just sitting there with my mouth open because your Krypton, it kind of, there's your Krypton now. There's no other Kryptons, you know. It's like you really define that, and certainly define their ships and everything. It's just gorgeous. And then of course we've got you can segue into Smallville, which is just like classic, you know, Rockwell Americana, and then we've got Metropolis, which is kind of normal with a little overlay, and it all seamlessly works together. So the students wanted to know what your visual references were, if any, because I know you dreamt a lot of this up just for this world, the literally world of Krypton that you made for us.
To be here for this cause, and amazing to see the movie again. It's been a while for me, I'm afraid to say, and it's a great movie. So to your question, yes, there's a lot of influences. I mean, first of all, to have a chance to redesign the logo and to think about just the characteristics of this idea of the curves. First of all, the Superman S prompted the idea that there's no straight lines on Krypton. So as a designer, that was a underlying rule. The organic. There's a photographer called Carl Blossfeldt, who you should check out, who was the first photographer to really photograph in extreme fine detail the sort of symmetry of plants. We looked at just a whole array of organic forms, shells and plants in this photography and Art Nouveau, but it all came down to this idea that the S prompts the entire visual language of Krypton. And it was to kind of build a history of that and to go back into a world where biology was the primary science and the language itself, and and that premise really went through everything down to the lettering of the language, down to the very finest detail.
Great, thanks. That's amazing. It worked. I have a question for Christina, and this is a very important process question about how the motion picture business works. I read that you were cast in Man of Steel because Zack saw you in a hummus commercial. And now
This is true.
I want a show that would have a hummus commercial in it. I think
By the way, it was not a obscure hummus commercial. It was a national spot. And I was watching mainstream television. It was like some obscure hummus channel. We're like,
Hummus
you know,
R Us.
Yeah, and then you were like, Debbie, find out who that is. And I was like, what? Yeah, find out who that is. I want her to be in the movie.
Thank you for doing it.
So what I want to know, Christina, is like, you're home, you're minding your own business, phone rings. Mr. Zack Snyder would like you to be in a Superman movie because of your work in a hummus commercial. How did that play?
So I was living in New York at the time, and funny enough, the commercial did not play in New York. But I was out of town. I was at my friend's wedding, and I'm in the car with my parents and my then boyfriend and now husband. And so I get this email. I just check my phone, and I kind of laughed in the car, and I was like, bullshit. And my family was like, well, what? They saw my reaction. I was like, someone's punking me. Someone made up an email address, and this is ridiculous. And I had gotten an email from assistant at Warner Bros. Some, kind of, you have to do it. So I, tape it, but it was 3 lines. It felt like an acting exercise from school that was an open scene. And I was like, hey, is this, and it was a different character at the time. And
wasn't the scene you coming into? I'm trying to remember this.
It was an office assistant first.
Was it? I'm trying
Yeah.
Because I remember. And did you do 2? Did you do a second?
No, 5 of them.
Yeah,
That's what
I
I
sent
remember.
Yeah, I remember
5 different takes.
It was 5 versions of the exact same line that were this is the angry version.
Yeah.
This is the, and I was like, see, I told you she was a genius.
Really though, because
I think a lot of people don't understand the word producer. It's like, well, what does that mean? And you see the credits and what have you. But and so obviously it could be a financing producer, like an executive producer, a creative producer, a budgeting, a line producer, and it can be more than one. So I'm curious how you define your role or roles as a producer. And then as a second part of this question, I'd love to hear, if you want to tell us, what's your favorite part of the gig and what's kind of like going to the dentist?
Well, the budget is kind of like going to the dentist because no matter how much money you have, it's never enough money. It's just, whether it's a small movie or a big movie, it's never enough, and you always want to do more. Discussions to have, I think, with the studio and with your departments who are presenting their budgets and everything, so I don't like that part. I think planning it and finding the people and putting it all together and figuring out the methodology. I see my role, it's my job to bring the director's vision to the screen and to fight for that vision. And it doesn't mean we don't disagree about things, because we do, but sometimes.
Occasionally.
Occasionally. But he's, at the end of the day, the director, and it's my job, and we talk
I thought you were
about
gonna say,
it.
at the end of the day, he just does what I say.
And talk about things, but then we always have a united front. So if we're going to the studio, or if there's something, whatever it is, and whoever we're talking to, we have a united front. And I think and we have each other's back. And I think that's everyone we surround ourselves with on the crew. A lot of people we've worked with for many years. It's like a family. It's people we trust. And you know, allowing them to actually do their jobs and do their jobs well, you know, just kind of makes it all, you know, work. But I don't know, my job is crazy because sometimes it's about like growing wheat or, you know, like you become an expert on these really strange things. But I think from casting to casting your crew, figuring out the schedule, the budget, and then all the things and problems that come along the way because every best laid plan gets redone in production. So you're always starting over and you just have to kind of be nimble on your feet. But I love it. Like you know, when I say going to the dentist, like, yeah, the money is always something that I don't really like talking about. But like to be able to create these stories that will live on, you know, much longer than us, that touch people in a way, makes them laugh, makes them think. I feel so lucky to be able to do that.
If the guys who planned D-Day came back and saw what Debbie did, oh, oy. I'll leave that to you. That looks too hard. So anyway, I have a question for Mr. Zack Snyder here, and I apologize if you've answered this for the fans before. I don't know the answer to this question, nor did the students. What attracted you to the DC universe and these particular characters? And then what was the genesis for your vision that is so specific and so defining of this, you know, that's why they call it the Snyderverse. It's fascinating because it's been done and you did it again differently and better. So where did that come from?
Well, thanks. Yeah, Zach. Well, thank you, sir. That's fine. That's kind. And also, the only thing I'll add to what Debbie was saying is that, you know, we were talking about when she was just talking about growing wheat. For the movie we just made, we had to grow a lot of wheat, space wheat.
10 football field,
Yeah.
right? Like,
It's
yeah.
space wheat.
10
Gotta
football
call it, you
fields.
put space in front of anything in a space movie. You say space and then the thing. Anyway, so, but we learned all that stuff on Man of Steel because we had to grow all that corn. So we were corn farmers before we were wheat farmers. And so, yeah, a lot of agricultural. Probably you didn't learn. You guys should have a class, maybe, something to consider, like, you know, just agricultural. You know, so you have a little bit of like, oh, no, we can't start then because the
Little animal
corn
husbandry.
won't be ready, of course. This is the wrong weather. It's the wrong, you know, so you know. Anyway, as far as my attraction to DC characters goes, I've been a fan. I was a huge fan of a comic book called The Dark Knight Returns, and when I was growing up, and also Watchmen, and yeah. Not a bad comic book if you're into comic books. Anyway, and so we were kind of in this, you know, headspace, comic book headspace, and I had met Chris, and he had, I think, for whatever reason, Chris didn't want to do a Superman movie, and David had written this script, and so it was really a matter of him finding someone to do this Superman movie, and he approached Debbie and I. He and Emma, we went to lunch at their house, and we just talked about what it could be. And then we read the script, and I was like, yeah, that's cool. I think I can do it. And I think from there, I kind of was like, well, this is what I would do. And Chris liked that, and that's kind of how the movie happened. And I think that, for me anyway, you know, the idea of like this sort of 5-movie arc, this sort of big giant, like, you know, spinning of a giant universe evolved pretty quickly from the production of Man of Steel. Like, as we were working on this movie, it really started to churn in me this idea of really building out this giant world for what this could be.
Popping up all over the place. This gentleman right here, Lily, please stand up, sir.
Hello? Hello? Cool. Working? Okay, cool. Thank you. great. Man of Steel is my favorite movie. I'm going to show you my tattoo.
Woo!
Saw it in theaters 10 years ago. Loved it. So my question is for Zack and Christina. How long did you know that Swanwick was going to be Martian Manhunter? And I know that the goal was to do Jon Stewart, but Carrie Ferris is, Hal Jordan. So I was just wondering if you knew how that was going to work at all. Thanks.
Okay. As far as I was just saying it on the stream inside that the conversations around Martian Manhunter started like in post on Man of Steel. I mean, not on Man of Steel, on PBS. Because I was watching it, when we were watching in the editorial, I was like, Swanwick. I don't know, but like, it's literally, we were talking about it earlier, like if you look at when Superman goes to the glass in Man of Steel, and everyone backs up except for Swanwick. And that was liked it. And I was like, no, that's cool. That's good. Yeah, do that. And I think that really, in retrospect, inspired this whole possibility. And so, yeah, that's my take. And I don't know what you thought.
Well, jumping off of that, I don't remember if it was like something that, it must have been something you posted on social media. But Harry and I have stayed friends over the years. So he texts me and he's like, "Have you seen this? Like, did you know?" Because it wasn't like a thing that was chatted about lightly on set. But it was cool, and I know Harry was so excited. It was so cool. Yeah.
Harry was.
Glad you're able to come and do that for us. Philosophically, as storytellers, now this is for Zack and for Deborah, you're known as a very detail-oriented storyteller. Your plotting is very tight. It really requires people to pay attention in a way that maybe other films don't require of them. Is there any time through the testing process or when you're going through other producers at the studio or something like that where they think maybe the films are too tight, you're asking too much of the audience, they're getting lost, they're making mistakes when they go online and saying stupid shit over and over and over again for 10 goddamn years? Be maybe a little smarter than maybe sometimes they are.
Go ahead.
I mean, look, it's not even like that we think about it in that way. Yes, when we show a movie and things that I think are obvious, sometimes maybe not to everybody. But I always think that like if it's there, if it's in the movie and I know it's there, then it makes sense. Like if the movie, even if you have to look for it, you'll find it. You know what I mean? It's not like it's not there. And so, all the planning that we have, and you come to a moment in the movie where you're like, wait, that doesn't make sense. They never set up that character. Like, that can't be true. Like, it's probably not the case, right? It's probably not the case that the character's not set up correctly. Now, yes, there are times where for time or for editorial or for whatever reason, you do certain things, you make certain cuts, you make certain compromises, and the movie, mostly effect, if you had seen the overall original concept, you'd have been like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So I think more than do we go like, oh, should we be more careful and make it a little broader or a little less complicated? More than that, it's just that we have the complicated thing to begin with, and we end up like, hacking a limb off of it in order for it to like fit in a box, and that's painful, but for a piece of mass entertainment, sometimes, you sacrifice, a detail for, viewability, I guess, is a way to sort of think about it. I don't know. Does that make sense, Debbie?
Yeah.
Extraordinary. And there's obviously nothing in there by mistake. It's consistent through the films. And so tell us a little bit about how your process for putting these soundscapes together.
We work with this amazing sound designer, Scott Hecker, who has worked on every single movie since Dawn.
Yep.
And we start really early in the process with Scott, and we will say, hey, like the world engines.
Yeah,
were
he
like
was
a
working. We
huge
had the
thing.
world engine sounds while we were shooting.
We were like, what does this sound like? Or whether it's, when we did the zombies in Army of the Dead, we wanted to sound different. What do they look like? What do they sound like? And here's what they look like. And, I think that dialogue, you wouldn't think it would start that early, but it starts with showing him some of the art, sometimes some of the footage. So then when we're in the edit room, because, that you have 12 weeks after you're done shooting, 2 weeks for the editor and then 10 weeks for Zack to present that director's cut. And you're working and working. So if you just start then, the same thing with music, like whether it be Hans or Junkie, they start really early on, getting into character and presenting suites of music that, really early. And I think that, it's about story and it's about character. And the sounds, whether it's the sound of a particular space, we're working on space weapons right now. We've been working on those for a long time to figure out the perfect sound for those things, or the sound of the ships or whatever. Like it's, I think that just spending as much time developing the soundscapes than we do with the visual language is why, Zack also loves sound, so we always have a lot of it in the film.
Yeah, I do. I do love sound. I always say, Scott and I's favorite thing to say is I'd be like, I go, whoa. Like any noise that is like a door closing or like I go like, you should get like a door and record it. Like that should be the sound. He's like, well, it's like a cabinet. It doesn't really make sense. That the guy would, I'm like, well, still should be a safe door. Like everything should be safe. Bigger safe door. Like a smaller, like a range of safe doors. But a really huge one for, anything that's kind of bigger than than that. But yeah, no, Scott loves that because he's always like, yeah, let's do it. Yeah, he's like, sound is a weapon. That's what he always says. Because we'll be in the mix and I'll be like, oh, my ears are bleeding. And he'll say, then he's like, sound is a weapon. Be careful. Keep the dog. Like we were mixing the other day and there was like a dog there. The dog has to leave the mix stage or we have to put little headphones on it because it's too loud for the little dog. But it's true.
Well, you certainly got to hear it tonight, in this theater.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. That's Dolby Atmos. Thank you very much. There's 90 speakers in here. And
That's
when
good.
you have a good movie where people know what they're doing, it kind of kicks ass.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. So.
Sure, stand
I
up.
can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah, face that way. No, I'm just kidding. You don't have.
Okay, so I would really love to get an insight into your world building for Krypton, because even though it's not got a lot of presence as far as runtime goes, it's incredibly dense with socio-political commentary. It's like a really heavy allegory for the military-industrial complex and the climate crisis. You have these they're very clearly representative of like Western leaders who do nothing about the climate crisis that we're all having to deal with right now. And there's a polar bear, which like, why is there a polar bear in the movie if you're not talking about the climate crisis?
Yeah, we got the polar bear.
But yeah, it's just
We got him from IMAX, by the way, which
like
is cool.
It's talking about not having a moral compass. So it's really densely packed, even though there's not a lot there as far as, like I said, runtime goes. So yeah, any insight you can offer into that, because I find it really fascinating.
I mean, the only thing yeah, there's a lot. I mean, yes, thank you, great question, and there's a lot to unpack with that. We could do like probably an hour of that. But and I'll let Alex talk about the design because he did touch on it, but I think there's more there. I guess for me, it was like, yes, it's a small part of the movie. Well, small, what is it, 20 minutes or something like that, or maybe less. And we knew but you have to sort of do the work of making a credible world for Superman to come from. correct method, like, so like all of those layers, I think were informative in discussions, we would say like, how do you then visualize like a world like that and also make it beautiful, right? Because in a weird way, it still has to be like compelling and beautiful, like no matter what, like even if, Jor-El's house looks like a giant penis. But there's a reason, there's a why to it. And I think I was like I thought that was awesome, by the way. And I think that the Citadel is very like very strong and very, well, they were trying to, what they're trying to do in there. Mythological place that, and it doesn't exist even as it does in the movie. So like, even if you were going to go look at historical Krypton as it is in the comic books or in movies, we weren't going to do that. Like, we were going to be like, no, okay, can we learn from it? Yes. Can it inform? Yes. But I think in the end, because our story is so particular, the design has to service that story. But of course, without denying and or contradicting the canon and tradition in some way. So that's the challenge anyway.
Was incredibly satisfying. I've never done since, never been asked to do before, was when Zack wanted a language, where to begin with, I think you wanted a language that they could speak.
Yeah, my original concept was that on Krypton, it was all going to be subtitled, and they were going to learn Kryptonian, and that was going to be just how the movie was. Like, they were like, you wouldn't. And then my original idea was like, no subtitles. Like, it's like Passion of the Christ. It's like Aramaic or something. Like, you just have to kind of understand. Like, you have to just sort of figure it out from the content. That was, yes, exactly. That was how like crazy it was at the beginning. And then it was like,
I see a woman right on the end there. She's waving. She's going to stand up. Poor Lily has to schlep clear across the stage.
Hello. Zack and Debbie, I'm a video production major, and many people consider the action genre to be a boys' club. However, I believe your films depict women as powerful and autonomous and contain many nuanced examples of gender theory. Can you speak on the intentionality in which you portray the women in your films, specifically in Man of Steel?
wow. You want me to go? Or you can go.
I'm going to go on this one.
Okay, good.
I think what was amazing when we were talking about the characters and working with David Goyer on the script was that I think traditionally Superman was always saving Lois, right? And I feel like in our film, they save each other. She saves him as much as he saves her. And I think that was really important. I think Zack is definitely not threatened by strong women in his life. And, and we try and surround ourselves, we always talk about what's in the script. We always talk about the character. A lot of times we talk about female directors, but it's just as important for all the technical positions, because there are like 500 people on these big movies, sometimes 1,000 on a day if you're counting construction. And I was always so tired of looking around, and I love men. Listen, I like working with them. It's great. I'm very comfortable with that, but I also want to see more women behind the camera. And
you get the last question. No, we need a mic so that the people at home can hear.
Oh, okay. All right. So I spent a bit thinking about this. Zack, love your work, always have. Talk about your cinematography, because I feel like you, more so than many other comic directors, have a style where you almost like the framing always looks like it's a comic book panel. Like Justice League, almost that whole movie looks like a walking comic book. Just tell me I know you draw, but tell me like some of your thought process, what goes into your cinematography. Thank you.
Thank you. That's good. Appreciate them. Like sort of compositionally and from a story standpoint and like as a piece, I do like as best I can. I like each frame to have a little bit of a beginning, middle, and end as best I can. And I think that's probably why it has an illustrative quality, because like an illustration, which is whether it be a comic book drawing or a painting or whatever, it really relies on that one frame to tell its entire story. It has to convey, it has to have a beginning, middle, and end. It has to have depth. It has to have be emotional, be world building. It has to be everything itself. But we are complete as ourselves, and so, but we are part of this big tapestry. So I think that's a way of thinking about it. Like when you go to make a shot, and now I don't mean to be like instructive, but like if you're a filmmaker and you're going to make a shot, if that is even in the smallest way in your consciousness, that like, wow, what about this shot? Because the truth is, if you know anything about the way a movie set works, it's like, okay, we got to get the shot of them coming in the door and sitting down and taking the pencil out and starting to write the thing. So you're like, okay, cool. Like, okay, like I guess the door's over there. So, in order to see them come through it, we're going to point the camera at the door. You're a kid anymore. So you're like, okay, all right, just like, how about like this? Like we'll see if we can capture them on film in some way, like walking across the room. So there are those moments as well. It's just like the reality of just madness that is motion picture photography. But if at all possible, to endeavor to make a frame that you find aesthetically compelling, I think that's really where it, and also I would say to any filmmakers out there, and whether it's a movie or a painting or a photograph, whatever you're doing, you are also the prism of the thing. Like the AI doesn't have the ability, like as a viewer, I want this prism between me and the reality that the filmmaker puts on. Like, so you have your experience, you walk around the world, you see things, you feel things, and then when you make a movie, it goes through you and onto the screen. And I, as a human being, want that. I want your touch, your personality, your way of seeing on screen, so I can have an empathetic human experience by what you put on screen. And I think that try anyway to think about the way I photograph things, because I had a teacher here at Art Center, this guy named Paul Jasmine, amazing photographer, and he said, it doesn't matter, like the camera, none of it matters, like the quality of the camera, all that matters is your point of view. That's it. That's all you have as a filmmaker and as an artist, is the way you see. Like, no one can know what you see, and the only way to get into your head and to see how you see is for you to make something that allows me to sort of experience that in some small way. So like
Days ago, they were in a classroom in this room screening their work, and because Zack and Debbie and Wes were so instrumental in getting this going, the conversation turns to Zack. And everybody's, kind of talking about his films and what have you. And then one of the students, sort of apropos of nothing, says, most film directors are so ugly, but Zack is handsome.
That's nice.
I thought, okay.
That's a good way to end this whole conversation.
What's up with that?
I don't think it's really kind of.
Beautiful man.
On the inside
Debbie,
too.
Debbie agrees. I hope.
I think he's
So
hot.
that's it. That's it. The whole thing was that we would. Well, I guess we were talking about it just a minute ago. That the idea was that in whatever Justice League that would have been, Justice League 2, I guess, you would have seen a scene. There was a scene where they were getting ready to. Flash was getting ready to go back in time, and the idea was that he said to Bruce, No, Bruce said to him, like, that there were two possible windows in which he could jump back through time. And Bruce said, well, which one would you have gone through if I didn't say anything? And he said, well, we were going to go through this one. He said, don't go through that one, because you went through it, it didn't work. Right. I said, you can't, so go through the other one. So you would have seen that, right? So then he would have gone to the correct moment.
And he had to tell him something that would make him believe.
Yeah, and he would have had to tell him something, yeah.
Yeah.
Which at that time was that in the other reality was that the child of Lois Lane's child was his.
Right.
That's what he told Bruce to make him believe that he was really from the future.
I will
anyway.
be here tomorrow.
Oh, you're not coming tomorrow? Okay, well, I'll relate it to him then.
But
go ahead.
I would be really interested to know more about the creative collaboration between the two of you as it applies to the political intrigue of this story, because it's so pervasive and multifaceted. False flag operations, retaliation against whistleblowers, and in particular, the use of a false testimony as a propaganda tool to fan the flames of conflict. In this case, it's between two superheroes and not two countries or political forces. But it conjures historical memories of things like the Naira testimony in 1990 for the Gulf War, and Colin Powell with the WMDs. So if you could offer as much time as you're able to give to this really big topic, because it's really interesting, and it's such a unique way to tell a superhero story that none of these other superhero stories are going there, but you two went there.
Yeah, we were really, yes, that's a great question.
That's a great question.
And I will say that this could be its own, college class we could teach about that. But instead, I will say that yes, Chris is very, and was very interested in, sort of unilateral power and how that would be represented by Superman and/or Batman, and that on a local level or on a global level, the two of them represent, kind of two tips of the spear in those two different arenas, and how on a micro level, Batman is sort of affecting policy on the streets, a lot of street level, and Superman affecting policy on a global level. And what are those tools? Even just subtly in if you're looking at maybe it's not that subtle, but if you're looking at the protests against Superman outside the Capitol, there's one of them has a drone, on a stick, because we were saying, it's that level of sort of how do you take an icon like Superman and superimpose those powers over whatever, the implications are of someone. There are forces around him that easily can take what he does and shape it in a way that when it gets to the public, it's sort of something else. And and that's obviously a thing that, unless you're naive, could be happening in the real world every day. So that was really a thing we talked about all the time, and with many examples that, when you look at the movie, you can really see how it applied to the time we made it, and literally it really does stand the test of time, in the sense that it, we could have made this movie yesterday and it would still have the same impact. Anyway, so
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Not all of superhero movies and comic book style films in the last decade or so, they've really shied away from showing, I think, real violence, whether it's towards humanity or even towards the villains. There's almost an aversion to showing something brutal or something that makes you feel small and helpless, kind of like what we see with Lex. Even your heroes might have to make giant sacrifices that can go against those moral compasses, be it killing or letting someone die. But what is it that you found that you wanted to explore in showing what I think is the reality of what these gods and demons can do in our world and the stakes for which they fight? Because their actions on our half, I think, feel so much more impactful when you see them succeeding, or when you see everything that they're all capable of.
A responsibility in some ways, I do not, it is not my intention to, tear them down. It's my intention to try and understand them and their relevance, If the way you show them whether it be vulnerable, whether it be confused, and whether it be like questioning the why of their existence. Those are all things that, as they are challenged by those things and or overcome those things, they become sort of, you lock them in as iconographic or as important, I guess, you know. And it's only by challenging them as icons that you end up with the real hero in the end, you know. And so that was the thesis that I had given myself as far as how these characters would be portrayed, that I would deconstruct them, but in an attempt to make them, you know, put them on a journey that sets them as what we believe they are, you know, or can be. So that was kind of, I don't know if that answers the question, but that's the why of it to me. She would come across some amazing warrior on the battlefield that she would say, hey, I'm looking for this god of war. I need, you know, a team to help me. And that was the basic concept behind who all those guys were. And that they saw her on the battlefield and she was so insanely powerful that they were like, yeah, I guess in service of this goddess, like that, you know, is even more powerful than like the service of my country or whatever I'm doing, whatever political war I'm in. This goddess asking me to join her is like, that's like quite an honor. And so that's.
And let's get other questions for the panelists too as well. Visual effects questions, stunt questions.
No, I'm good.
Stunt visual effects. Cinematography for Larry Fong down there.
Just keep going, Zach.
Let's call Larry on the phone.
Cameras and lenses.
Okay, so last one, at least for Zach. Quick question. So I know it was hinted, essentially, that Kara was one of the survivors from the ship with the open pod and the skeleton. I was just curious when you were going to actually bring her in, if you had any, thought of bringing her into one of the later movies.
No, tell the real story. Tell the real story that...
Oh, there we go. There we
go. Because, the whole thing of like whether or not magic and the gods, there's a version where like, okay, that's cool, I guess. But like, there's also the more sort of scientific kind of, you have like a mythology built up of like, where do gods come from? Like, what is that about, And so anyway, we had played around with that quite a bit.
Yeah. And Ares was the one that caused the scout ship to crash.
Yeah.
And be in the ice.
What?
Yeah. He killed his crew.
Yeah.
Wait, you can't just throw that out there.
You can.
That's not. That
I just did.
Follow up.
We have a lot of conversations about this stuff. So.
Aren't you glad DJ came instead of Larry?
Larry might have said that too.
All right, other questions. That man right there had his hand up first. Yes, you, sir. Yes. Batman had his hand up first. You're next, Batman. I'll get you. I promise.
Hey, Zach. Thank you for taking the question. My brother and I came out from New Jersey for this. Very happy to be here.
Jersey!
I'm going to ask you something that I've been wondering.
Where in Jersey?
Verona by Montclair.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you something that I've been wondering about since the first Batman vs. Superman trailer. One of the elements that you introduced in that trailer was the dead Robin suit in the Batcave. Robin's death at the hands of the Joker was teased again in Suicide Squad and your version of Justice League, but was never shown on screen. What were the events leading up to and resulting in Robin's death in your universe?
I'll do a brief one because I think that that's still something that would be cool for people to see at some point. I don't know when or ever, but so I don't want to ruin it entirely. It may never happen, but
like on Netflix.
Yeah, nice.
We thought
to hurt Batman. Obviously, he has at that point he had his real vulnerability was Robin, right? And so I think that what's obvious is that the Joker understood that, right? And all I'll say is that, I think I've talked about this a little bit, haven't I? That, he blew him up, or it looks like he's scorched him. I think beyond that, I really don't want to say the actual circumstances because I feel like it's a spoiler for maybe a thing that will never need to be spoiled, but we should wait to see, don't you think, a little bit?
Yes. Can I try a Joker follow-up?
Sure.
It might be a spoiler for something that we might get to see at some point in the near future at some point. But in the nightmare sequence of Justice League, it's made very clear that Batman had to bring Joker along because he was going to be important somehow. Right. How might he be important to the mission they were trying to complete?
Our theory is that he's the one that knows where the kryptonite, what shards of kryptonite exist. He has information. And so he's being carried. So he's basically made a deal with Batman. Don't kill me, and I'll get you a tool to fight Superman. And so he's kind of stuck with him in that way. And so, like, if he kills him or gets rid of him, then he's screwed himself.
So who's going to give him the reach around?
Yeah, exactly. That is
All
true.
right.
There's a couple other people that would.
Batman, over here, Batman.
First of all, I just want to preface and say that as someone who lost a stepbrother to suicide this entire weekend means a lot to me. So I want to thank all of you for lending your creativity to a powerful movement.
Incredible. Awesome, brother. Thanks for sharing that.
I've been wondering for all you guys. I know that the Batman v Superman team up movie has been in creative development in creative development for a long time, and I just wondered if there were any initial ideas that all you guys had that the studio kind of rejected or kind of like mandated that you not do. And if there was anything that you could share about down, and we'll just have the fans rally and get stuff done.
Yeah, the one that you saw.
The one that we saw?
Yeah, I mean, like in a lot of ways, that was the thing that when Chris and I sort of wrote the movie or talked about this version of the movie, it was not the version of the movie necessarily that the studio was. Like, it was not like a big fun romp where those two are like, just you can imagine. I think that there's a version like, I'm sure the version of the movie that's on the poster in I Am Legend is more of the movie. Whatever that movie was going to be was probably the movie that they wanted. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I don't have that script, but that was it. But you can just tell by the poster that it seemed more fun. But not epic. Yeah. But fun. Hilarious. I bet there was a lot of zingers in it. Like they were zinging each other the whole time. They probably hurt each other more with zingers than actual blows.
Hey, Zack.
Like there was comments about like, why is your underwear on the outside of your pants? And he's like, why's yours?
Zach, I remember.
This is an alien uniform.
Remember when you kept coming back to me saying we have to, the MPAA wants us to remember we couldn't do the blood splat on the wall.
Yes.
Right, from the crate, which is
Yes.
in the one that you like, but not
You guys
in the
saw
theatrical.
the blood on the wall.
But we kept taking all those things out and it was still getting an R rating, and then you got that note from them, well, we just think that Batman's too mean to Superman.
Yeah.
And we're like, can you really comment on that, you guys?
I didn't think that was like in your domain. Like to just not like the idea of them fighting, and so now it's R. That was,
Even the
100%.
MPAA.
Yeah, they were just like, we think it's rude that they're fighting. And I was like, I'm sorry, it's in the title. It's like.
Is that in your list of what? It's an R rating? No, I
yeah,
don't
this
see
is
it here.
NC-17. This is an X.
Cut that part out.
Yeah. Is there any way you could cut them fighting out? That'd be cool. How about they just team up and like each other?
Yeah, that's it.
What about that?
Violence, language, and a mean superhero.
Yeah.
The reasons for your rating.
And yeah. Like, can't they just like, you know, maybe they like argue at the first act, but then they shake hands and then like they fight the bad guy together. I go, well, they kind of fight the bad guy together at the end. Then you see that, and they're like, well, there's a lot of fighting before that.
DJ, when I put the question out to Twitter followers about something they wanted to know about this film, there was a lot of talk about Metallo and sketches that were potentially out there for that character to be included. Is that going way back? Yeah.
Yeah. We actually did a like a previs test. Remember, we actually modeled him and everything.
Metallo,
Whatever.
thank
Yeah, because you had a design for that, right? So we built that and had him like by the Washington Monument and that whole thing. Yeah. That didn't make it.
Live in a world, and this world has to fit the character, and vice versa. I think one of the things I've always tried to do is to keep working on character and creatures as well as the sets for one reason, because I think they belong to the same thing, and it makes sense. There's a logic in the design, and that's why I'm always interested in projects that brings those creatures or characters. In the case of Batman, Superman, or all the characters that go around, I always have a little pass at it, and we look at it with Zack. It's not my job to necessarily design the creature, but bring some ideas on the table, and that's super important for me. I don't think I want to do films that don't have characters and creatures and things like that. This is kind of what I do. It makes the sets also very organic. You think
Browns, which are really not sharp and hard, but like really kind of soft and forgotten. And I think that sort of contrast is really.
Look at the Batmobile. For me, it's not a car. It's like it's a creature. I always looked at it like that. That's why it's got wings. That's why it's got a chin. It's got a face, and it comes alive to me if it's something like that. I just couldn't make a car. That's why we always. The first design is always a sketch that comes out of nowhere. It's not like looking at other cars to start designing. We do the first thing always a small. The Batmobile, I keep saying this, but the first time I met you and I went directly to a Starbucks and started to sketch the Batmobile, the first thing I did, because I felt this is where everything was for me in my world of design, is that to create.
You went to Starbucks and did that?
I did. That's the closest.
Shirt with their hand up raised. Yes, that's you, right? Yeah. Don't turn around. You stand up, and a mic will come to you.
Stand up and a mic will come to you.
So it's kind of like a. It's kind of like a Snyderverse related question, but like I saw Watchmen, I loved it. Casting was perfect. Casting for Justice League, Batman vs Superman, perfect. I don't know if you're familiar with Doomsday Clock, but I was wondering if that was in your vision or if what you think of it, and was that ever gonna come to fruition eventually in the future?
Which one was Doomsday Clock?
It was the crossover between Watchmen characters.
Yeah,
and,
was that the
DC.
Jeff Johns?
Yeah, Jeff
comic?
Johns. Yeah.
Yeah, probably not.
My dear friend and a damn fine actor and the soul of this movie, Mr. Ray Fisher.
Yes, it is true.
And we have one final person to announce. Brilliant writer, brilliant director, brilliant actor, and I think the finest Batman I have ever seen, Ben Affleck.
Short little motherfucker. But yeah, of course I collaborate with Zack again. I mean, when we find of course.
This is from Stephen Mark Monteith. What other New Gods characters did you plan to feature in the JL movies? Because I don't like being alone. And how much development would they receive? We saw Granny Goodness, so would we have seen the Furies? What about the other members of Darkseid's family?
Yeah, for sure. All of them. I mean, he had to really get an invasion force together, and I think he was going to, get his own.
There was going to be a Christmas album, too, right?
Really beautiful.
Yeah.
And a special.
Yeah. Mayor timelines, with the one we see in JL2 just being the final one where Barry successfully activated the cosmic treadmill to warn Bruce in time, or was it just something you thought would be cool?
That's pretty fair. It's a pretty fair question. I would say that particular shot, the one, in the flash moment where he sort of has all those visions of the future, that one I think is more impressionistic than the actual hard timeline that you see in the final sequence. So I think that's probably the answer, is that he's seen, I would say, a more metaphorical.
Journalists who have told the truth. So for the both of you, how have these big political topics informed your creative process as storytellers in these films?
I'll let you begin then.
So starting off with an easy one. That's cool.
Well, there's a thing that Bruce says in BVS, which is if there's even a 1% chance that he could destroy the world, then we have to treat it as an absolute certainty. And that seemed to be something that was happening in the wars of our time, right? There was this idea that there's an axis of evil, and if there's even a minuscule chance that there's going to be a suitcase nuke in New York City, then we have to treat it as a certainty and we have to make war. So that idea that was going through...
That's one of the things that I love about working with Chris and have since I met him and got to know him, is that he operates as a screenwriter on a lot of different levels simultaneously, where you have a plot story that's very keen and paced and makes sense, and you have character stories that are connected and compelling and interesting and nuanced, and oftentimes there are thematic corollaries that don't impose themselves and stand out in front of the movie so that it's a screed or that it's didactic, but rather it's kind of marbleized into those two other elements, so that if it's something that you're interested in, if it's something that resonates with you, it works on that level. Additionally, if it's something with which you're about which you're not interested or aware, it sort of goes by, and yet there's a kind of I've always get the sense with Chris that the plot is sort of if the screenwriter is the cat burglar breaking into the house, the plot is sort of the meat that's thrown to the guard dogs, while the themes kind of break their way into the window, so to speak.
And we always talk about, if you want to go deep on these movies and on this mythology, it's there for you, right? And so, yes, would I be interested in whatever medium or whatever way these ideas would continue? Of course I would. But, yeah. But yeah, in the meantime, we forge ahead and we do what we do. And so, like that. But yes, thank you. But I love this world, and I love these guys that I've gotten to do this with. And it's been amazing. So thank you.
Including our gracious host. My name is Carlos, and I just want to say thank you all for doing this. The foundation we're supporting, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, that's a battle I've struggled with personally. And these movies, the stories you've directed, the characters you've emboweled, the things you've written, edited, and just being a part of in general, it gives hope to so many people, way more than just this theater of loving fans. These stories speak to us, and even though we can't fly, we can fight, no matter who we are. And I just wanted to ask you guys on a personal level, for every one of you, give me a sentence answer. On a personal level, how do you feel knowing that you're part of something that gives hope to so many people that really need it?
For AFSP, and I hope you do too.
I guess for me, we do these things, we make this giant thing, but then to have it have, and I've had the pleasure of having a lot of, interactions with people who I get to hear their stories and get to understand what they've gone through, just has it impacted our families. And, so that sharing for me is incredibly moving and really lets me know that there is not only is there work to be done, of course, but being proud of the work that we are doing. I feel like it's the smallest thing I can do for, because I really, love the outreach that everyone gives, and it's amazing.
I can take both mics.
to mimic what's been said, it's an honor. It is, and it's also a great responsibility. I think for me, I've learned a lot from playing this character. I've learned a lot from the people that have supported this film. It's the culminating phrase that I think encapsulates it best is, I'm not broken and I'm not alone.
Bravery it takes and sense of self to stand up and talk openly. I think that's extremely helpful and good. And thank you. And both any association with an effort like this is an honor, certainly. And kind of a similar way, I could sort of look at my own life, in a lot of different ways. But the truth is, I'm old now, right? And I've done 55 or 60 movies. But the movie the character that people most commonly approach me about, in my own first-person experience, is undeniable as this character in these movies. And it clearly has an enormous reach and impact on people. It means a great deal to people.
To the end of the Zack Snyder Justice League cut and the effort of that work, it's very emotional, cathartic. I wish we could do more, because I think there's a lot of story left to tell. But the thing that I kind of take with me is, and everybody's efforts through this organization, is it's my first time yesterday being on the panel and meeting a lot of you afterwards. And I'm inspired by you guys being inspired by what we've done. I think it's, like Ben said, it's a very humbling thing and something that I think was unexpected for me as a personal note. So thanks everybody for paying attention.
Yes, go ahead. One of the things that I was doing was restoring a lot of things for Zack that were very important to him in the film, and I keep coming back to the concept of life affirming and acceptance, and the scene with Wonder Woman where the little girl after the explosion says, I want to be like you when I grew up, and she says, you can be anything you want to be. And that concept is something that comes through in everything that Zack does. It's very, very life-affirming. And for me as a collaborator, it was very exciting to be in Zack's orbit and then notice all these badass women all around him.
Yes, in Detroit. It was around Easter, and I hop out of the SUV, and, I'm a little bit nervous, right? It's my first test for anything, really. And I hear a voice behind me go, Ray! I turn around, and it's Zack, and I go, yo, Zack! And we just take this elevator ride up, and I'm just like, oh, this is a dude like me. Okay, cool. We chopped it up about comic books, granny goodness, all the, nuances of, really just silly and geeky stuff. And I was like, I feel like I'm amongst my people, if that makes any sense. And so by the time we got into filming for BVS, Zack, he was like, hey, you want to see what we're shooting today? I was like, yeah, cool. And so I ended up meeting Ben during that sequence, was it the graveyard sequence where the bat pops out of the mausoleum? Oh, right. They were filming that. And so I ended up getting to meet a lot of folks before we even got to set together. So it ended up taking a lot of the edge off for me, because I'm like, oh, I meet Jason for the first time, he picks me up and he just bear hugs me, and I'm like, okay, all right. That's this guy, all right? Got to meet Gull, got to meet everybody except for Henry beforehand, but, I will say across the board, everybody was really welcoming, really gracious, and just really excited to be there and get the work done. And I think it all trickles down from the top, just in how those environments get established. So, long answer short, I felt more than ready, because, folks believed in me to do the job that I was there to do.
Question for DJ. What were the challenges with the Batmobile, shooting the parademons? What kind of challenges did that present?
Well, in some ways it was easier than in BVS, because in BVS, Patrick's Batmobile could actually drive around and do stuff for real. So we were anchored with a lot of reality there, but we couldn't go to Pajarnoff because we were in London shooting. So that ended up being pretty much a virtual sequence, except for some stuff that we shot with Ben in the cockpit of the thing. And when Jason Momoa jumped off of the Batmobile and yelled out loud, Momoa, as he jumped into the stunt path. I never forget. So yeah, it was...
That's not in the movie, by the way.
Yeah. So...
We should have kept it. So many excellent actors have played it, and filmmakers have done it, and the mythology extends all the way, down through decades after decades, from this the Adam West TV series and the cartoons and stuff on up to it's really amazing films and art about it. So it's much more daunting in a way than because the other stuff you do, anything else you do, if you're doing it for the first time, there's nothing else to hold you up against, compare you to, there are no expectations. You have the liberty of just going out there and sort of defining it, for better or for worse, when people see it. And there's a similar there's a double-edged sword with a part like this, because you have a lot of tailwind and a lot of thinking about it and angsting about it. But all the performances that I ended up, being able to sleep at night around, it came down to actually sort of what Ray said. And, Zack creates an extremely comfortable, fluid atmosphere. And I think for me as a director, that's the most important thing that I try to do. I don't think I can succeed, or actors can't succeed without that, or at least they can't be as good as they can possibly be. And Zack is as good as anybody, if not better, that I've ever worked with at creating that environment, which is extremely important to feel like you're welcome to succeed. So it took away a lot of the thought, because
he's walking down a street. We shot it all on a sort of fake set. It didn't look like a street, but it was there's some cars parked around and whatever. And then he would walk up, and it was a 2-shot, and then it was a tight 2, and then it turned into an over, and it was just the sort of a single on gal. And they were kind of talking about you got to stop drinking and all this really intense stuff, and what's the matter with you, Bruce, and blah blah. She was really going at him. And at the end of the take, and the one good one, because it's on over Ben's shoulder like this, and Gal was here. And at the end of the take, he turns around and looks in the camera. He's like, okay.
There's it's taste, right? But those have told me about directing, and I always heard before I directed, there's the adage is, directing is 90% casting. And I was skeptical of that, and as years have gone by, I've become more and more convinced of it. And it is as you look at all these actors who Zack cast and how good they are and what they've gone on to do, it's a testament to Zack's taste. And his taste is very, as he says, intuitive. I don't know if you can learn it or teach it. He has a feeling. It's sort of what being like a filmmaker with a point of view is. As soon as he sees that thing, it bounces off him. It's very wonderful to work with somebody who's not clouded by a bunch of other thoughts or opinions, or what are people going to say, or what are they going to do, or what are they going to say, or how many followers do they have, whatever it is, that he is works by instinct and decisive and absolutely self-assured of that. And it's a very calming thing to have in a director. Okay, he knows where we're going, so I'm going to follow him.
Wow, wow, wow. Blue shirt right there waving both arms. Is this going to be the last one?
Guys, this is going to be the last one.
It's going to be the last question, guys. I'm so
Super
sorry.
Mario, you guys could stay for Super Mario. You can't actually stay.
They are throwing us out for Mario. So after this, it's going to be Ready the Armada. All right, so go for it.